Motel 6 commercial.
We'll keep the light on for you.
We'll keep the light on for you. We were sitting at supper the other night, and my dad said that, and I said, oh, I got the title for my next sermon. That's exactly what God did to those Wisemen. Well, let's, at the beginning, I want to set the record and the story straight, because we all think we know everything about the Christmas story, and especially about the Wisemen, right? Because we sing the songs and we know the pageants. Well, I might shock a few of you. One, they were not kings. There was nothing about them that was royalty. Two, they were not from the Orient. That might be a shocker. Three, they were most likely not just three of them. Four, we don't even know if they rode camels. Probably, but we don't know that for sure. What would we put in the nativity scene, right? And five, we don't know when they visited Jesus. Well, I want to give a little history of the Wisemen. Now, we've been talking about this, so I'm building on the information you already know. Remember when we talked about the 400 years of silence, and then I had talked about the deportation of the Israelites with King Nebuchadnezzar? Well, this comes hugely into play this week. Because in 597 to 582, scholars can't quite get the date right, but it's close. King Nebuchadnezzar defeated the Israelites, and he deported the Jewish people to Babylon. All right, now after the fall of Babylon, to the Persian king, Cyrus the Great, in 539, the exiled Jews began to return back to the land of Judah. So the Persian king said, you can go back home. Now, during this deportation time, there were some of the young Jewish men that had been taken and they had been put into their schools. They had used them for their knowledge. And how many people here know the name Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego? Does that make any sense? Yeah. Okay. Well, these young men, and it was during that time, it was King Nebuchadnezzar that they refused to bow down to. That's why the fiery furnace, that's why the lion's den. All this happened during that 40 years of deportation where they were there in Babylon. Now, when the Jewish people were allowed to go back, most of them went, but not all of them. These young men stayed behind. They had been moved from Babylon, probably around Persian area. Now the problem is, we're going to look at a map later, and when we kind of think of where Persia is, the problem was Persia had taken over, and they acquired quite a bit of land at that time, so we don't know exactly where they were at. But they started up schools, centers for learning. And what do you think they were teaching? They were still teaching Jewish things. Now, if you remember why King Nebuchadnezzar moved the Jewish people in the first place, it was because his idea was, if I keep them there for an entire generation, I can change their thought process. I can move them out of their culture. By the next generation, they won't even remember anything Jewish. See, that was the mindset. That was pretty smart. But to counter that, these young men started schools to keep teaching people Jewish things and the scriptures and the scrolls. And they learned the science. They learned religion as well. Well, these men were not only scholars, but they studied those treasured scrolls. Now, we need to fast forward. We were talking, this was 539, 82 to 39 BC. Now we are at roughly right around the birth of Christ. So 500 years, over 500 years have transpired, and these people are still studying the scrolls. They are still looking for a Messiah. They studied all the prophecies. They were magi. Magi means astrologers. They knew the sciences. They studied the stars. And the reason why they were so intent on studying the stars was because they were seeing the prophecies line up. They knew how the planets and the galaxies went. They knew Jewish history and prophecy, and they were searching, they were studying, and they were seeking. We talked about the different gifts. God gives the gift of wisdom, which is not just stuff we can read, but stuff that He gives to us. Knowledge that we could not know on our own. And I cannot help but think that there was not a lot of wisdom being poured into these young men as they were studying those stars, because how else would they know what they were looking for? Unless God had put that burning desire in their hearts. So why were they even looking? Why were they even diligently seeking? They had a pretty cushy life right there. So why would they keep looking for more? And what were they really hoping to find? This is where I said I really think God put this burning desire in their hearts not to stop until they had solved a puzzle, till they'd solved this riddle, till they had figured it out. Because they knew through the prophecies that at the end of that puzzle would lie the Messiah. Well, all we know is that the Magi were astrologers who were heeding the nudge of God, led by their heart and the light. And they left everything to embark on a journey. Now, I want you to think about that. That's kind of scary, really. I mean, what if God was to put this burning desire in your heart, and you're looking at everything and you're going, yep, I'm thinking that this might lead to the present end, but I don't know for sure. And I'm going to embark on about a 1,000-mile journey through not so nice a terrain. How many here would be jumping up and down going, yeah, ready. No. That's pretty scary. But they knew deep in their heart that this was a journey that would probably change their life forever. Now, these men did come from the east and from around Persia, and they traveled through unbelievably rough terrain. Like we said over there, it's just all rock. Mountains, rock. The same route, I want you to think about this. This was probably, they traveled a good chunk of that over the exact same terrain that their Jewish ancestors had traveled on their way back after the exportation 500 years before. Over half a millennium before. And yet, the generations had still kept seeking and studying and waiting. So we ask, how many made the trip? No, we don't know. Why do we come up with 3? Because of the 3 gifts. But back then, I can tell you right now that they did not travel alone. They all had their own servants. They all had their entourage. They needed several camels for more supplies to take because this was a long journey. They weren't just going for a day or 2. Well, this is a map, and I wanted to show this to you because if you can look, right here's Babylon. Okay? So over here's Jerusalem. So when they were exported, they couldn't just go this way across the tip. They had to kind of go up and around probably. And here's where Persia's at. So we don't know exactly in this area. Now when Persia took over, they conquered this whole area. This goes all the way back to India. But all the centers of learning were right in through here. That's still over a 1,000-mile trek though. Not just a little jaunt. Well, you can't see that one very well. That one had more of the terrain, the rocks and the mountains. But so the wise men take out, and while they've endured this whole time, they come in to the city of Jerusalem. And who's the first person that they should meet up with after they find out? Well, it would be like a little small town of McCool or Maywood, and let's say somebody really big pulled in with a great big fancy tour bus. You think that would get people talking? Or how about if the president's motorcade came in? Think everybody just got to stand there? Well, maybe, I don't know. There would be some talking. They want to know what's going on. And when they found out that these men were coming, seeking a Messiah, seeking the baby, whoa, news traveled fast to Herod. Now, Herod was a madman. He was crazy. And so he brings them in to his home, into his family, and he eats with them. And he wants to pump them for as much information as he possibly can. Now, you have to realize, even though he did not believe in the Jewish things, his scholars still knew the Jewish scriptures because he was paranoid that somebody was going to come in and take his throne. He just knew that there was going to be an overthrow. And when these guys come in and saying, we're here to worship the King of Kings, what do you think went off on his radar? Because like I said, at this time, Rome is the head of Israel. Herod is placed as the client king of Judea, which means his little sub-territory was that area. So he was the head of that division right there. He was a tyrant. He was very egotistical. He was huge in architectural. This is why the Jewish people loved him, because he rebuilt their temple. They wouldn't have had a temple if it hadn't been for him. But he also built his own temple, among many of the other structures. And he was very paranoid at this overthrow. And as the Magi tell Herod of the star and the prophecy, he consults with the scholars, and they confirm from the ancient scrolls from Malachi, as we read in the gospel today, that the Messiah, who would be king of the Jews, will come from where? Bethlehem. Right here, Malachi 6. And you, O Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are in no way the least among the rulers of Judah. For out of you will come a ruler who will shepherd my people, Israel. So a star. If you heard when I read the scriptures today, it said, his star. No other person in history has ever been given their own star. Oh, there's places out there where you can buy, I think, your own star. You can name your own star. But nobody has ever been given their own special star, except for Jesus. So my question that I've always wondered is, if this was such a big star and the wise men were able to follow it and it landed above his house, why did Herod not see it? Why did nobody else see the star? How long was it in the sky? Well, we know if they were watching these things take place and they had to walk over 1,000 miles, or ride over 1,000 miles, that it wasn't just in the star or in the sky for a day or two, or even a week or two. It was there for quite a while. My biggest question was, how did it shine in just one place? Now we talked, Bethlehem is only 5 miles from Jerusalem. And it said when they left Jerusalem and they went to Bethlehem, the star went and landed right above the place of the house where Jesus was at. We don't have any stars that do that. Maybe a street light. We don't have anything that spotlights right over one spot. Because it was Jesus' star. In Matthew 2 it says, and Herod privately summoned the wise men, and this was before they left. And he determined from them when the star had appeared, and he sent them to Bethlehem and said, go and look carefully for the child. When you find him, inform me, so that I too can go and worship him as well. He must have thought they had sucker written on their foreheads. I love this picture because it shows a light shining directly on Christ. Now I know this is from the Nativity movie, and this is right after he's born, and it's in the cave. But as you saw from the pictures before, the houses didn't look a whole lot different than the caves, did it? The stables, they're pretty much about the same. So when the scripture said they found them in the house, well, the house was right next to the stables, and the house looked about the same. We don't know how long Jesus stayed in that stable. God could have just given Mary that stable as a gift to get her away, to give her some privacy, and then he very well, the next morning, could have gone into the house. So, we don't know, but what we do know is the wise men did actually find him because of the star. And when it rose, it led them until it stopped above the place where the child was. And when they saw the star, they shouted joyfully. Can you imagine that? I mean, you have risked everything on the line. Not just your life, but your reputation, your whole, all of the learning, all the studying, everything on, well, let's be honest, compared to everybody else, probably a hunch, right? To go find a Messiah that was prophesied, and they found him! Jackpot! So we've been talking about the puzzle pieces. And that's what I think about when I think about these wise men. Because their job was putting together those pieces of the puzzle. The different astrological signs, and depending on some of the scholars you listen to, it was at the time where the constellation of Leo, the lion, the king, was just so, and the constellation of the Virgin was coming up at the same time, and all the different constellations were lining just right there, telling, announcing, proclaiming a sign, and that's what they were studying. And so they're trying to constantly put these pieces together, and then just when they think that they might have it all figured out, they set out. I wonder myself what was going through their minds on that trip. As we said, that wasn't a short trip, over 1,000 miles. I wonder if they ever questioned themselves, was this the right move? I wonder what problems they had on the way. I wonder how many times they almost turned back, but they kept going. And then when they finally arrived, they find the one missing piece, the Savior, the Messiah. It says as they came into the house and saw the child with Mary's mother, they bowed and they worshiped him. So why the 3 gifts? I said, well, because they were given gold, frankincense, and myrrh. 3 gifts, but we don't know how many were there. And after being warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they went back by another route to their own country. I think this is huge, not just because it kept Herod from immediately going and finding Jesus, but they listened. How many of us listen to God when he tells us something? Or how many of us start rationalizing, oh, nah, he said he just wanted to worship him. He ain't going to do anything bad. No, they were listening and they knew that what God was speaking was something they needed to act on and act on immediately. But it said they went by another route. I'm pretty sure they didn't have Google Maps back then, or MapQuest. How did they know another route? If you had finally found what you were seeking and God asked you to go by another route, would you be as willing to? I mean, the route you just came from was familiar. You kind of knew the territory. You knew what you were getting into. But now God's asking you to step out again into the unknown, into the scary, by a different way. I think I almost hear a word called change. Push it in there. So we're getting our picture closer and closer together and done. We have the world that God so loved that he gave his one and only son, a man and wife who risked everything and put it on the line to raise this child, to birth the child. We had the shepherds, the lowliest of low, who were the only ones that got the announcement about Christ's birth. And then we have wise men from afar. Jewish people who probably felt like they had been forgotten by God because they seemed like they were at the other end of the world. And yet it was them that God showed the prophecies and the star to. So we know the Magi were wise men. Why? Because they sought God and his prophecy. They followed Christ's star. They heeded the message in a dream. And they were searching and seeking something at the end of that light. And what they found was illumination, God's love, God's grace. Jesus said, I am the light. He is the one we should seek out. My question is, have you been searching and seeking for something to fill that void in your life? And have you given up or even quit looking? No matter how old you are, how long you've been searching. Sorry, I didn't fix that. So have you given up or quit looking? Do you feel like you have no gift to give, like we talked about in the children's sermon? Sometimes we say, well, I would come, but I don't have anything to bring. God can't use me. I have no talents. But the light of his word, Jesus is the word, and he tells us no matter how old we are, how long we've been searching, he has promised this, that he'll keep the light on for you. Amen.